it is Courtney with Empowered PAs. You're in my office, and this is my first live post with the Empowered PAs Facebook community group. It's a private group, and it's only for PAs and PA students. And the whole purpose of the group is really just to empower PAs, right? Like, that makes sense. So I'm really glad to see everybody joining. I know a couple people are going to be trickling in, but I'm just going to start because I have so much to share with you guys. I have 7 pages. So my goal is to try and make this relatively short. I don't know that I'm going to succeed, but because I really want to get this information to PAs out there. So my goal is 30 minutes. And at the end of the 30 minutes, I thought we would kind of open it up for questions. If I'm not done by then, do what you got to do. If you can't hang around, that's fine, but I'll open up for questions at the end, but I'm going to shoot for the 30-minute mark. So bear with me. There will be, for those of you that are joining, hi, welcome. Please save your questions for the end. I know there's going to be a lot of them. There will be a worksheet to download, or actually it's a set of worksheets that I kind of developed, and I'll go over them for you guys. And it's just to kind of work through, what kind of clinical role you're thinking about, why you're thinking about it, what kind of skills you enjoy, what non-clinical skills do you really have, and then kind of what are the possible options. So I'm really, really excited. I'm so excited. I've been excited for 3 days to talk to you guys about it, because this is why I started Empowered PAs. If you don't know me, my name is Courtney. I'm a pediatric emergency medicine PA. I'm also a paramedic. I did work in a general ER for 4 years, which was awesome. But, my background is mostly emergency medicine. And when I started having a family, I found that the ER schedule was really tough. And I started working on some other projects. I started working on clinical pathways or clinical practice guidelines. And that kind of blossomed into a more formal administrative role. And it's been great. It's reduced my burnout. It has improved my quality of life. It's been a really great transition. And so as part of that, I want to share this knowledge with other PAs, because I know I'm not alone, and that your needs change. You graduate from PA school, and suddenly, your needs are different after you've been working 5 or 10 years out. I had a family, and I could not work the ER life. I could not keep the ER lifestyle the way I wanted to. And so that worked for me. And so that's why I started the website empoweredpas.com. If you've joined this group but didn't know that existed, please go check it out. There's a ton of articles. There's lots of good stuff on there. This worksheet will only be for those of you who are joining me live. I may share it later, but for right now, it's just going to be for you guys. So if you can bear with me and hang out, I will share that information later. You'll sign up. You'll just send your email. You'll also get the monthly newsletter, but you can always unsubscribe if you want to. The big key is that you'll get these worksheets. So that is me. So I kept a bunch of notes so that I was able to tell you everything that I really wanted to tell you. So I also work, when I talked about this administrative role that I have had as a PA, it actually turned into a formal role. So in March, I accepted a role with our patient safety and quality group, and I actually work as a quality APP half-time. So I'm half in the ER and half as a quality APP. And that role, like I said, has been an awesome, awesome experience. So as the owner of Empowered PAs, if you didn't know what it was before, it's really just a community of PAs who want to kind of elevate your profession, right? We love taking care of patients. I love taking care of patients, but you need more. After a certain period of time, you need more than just taking care of patients. It can be in a variety of ways, and it doesn't have to be a more full-time, completely changing your job. This can just be one facet of your role as a PA. I very much promote raising awareness and visibility of the PA profession, and taking on non-clinical roles absolutely supports that. And that is why I'm here. That's why I'm so excited. That's why I'm very passionate about this. I think it's really important to make sure that not only patients understand what we do as PAs, but our other providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, they don't really understand what the role of PAs are, because we've kind of been niched into just patient care. Nurse practitioners have an amazing path for them to go into executive leadership or in other kinds of leadership roles. We just don't. It's not part of the way our profession was developed. And so we kind of have to carve our own path. And it's really challenging sometimes, but it also provides a lot of opportunity for us. So my goal today is to arm you with the knowledge that there is more out there. Like I said, it doesn't have to completely replace your role as a clinical practicing PA, but it could augment it, and it can really I think that some of these roles can really make you a stronger PA because you understand the business of medicine more, or you understand another facet of medicine differently. So that's my platform. That's what I'm sticking to. So also, my other goal with this today was that I'm going to change the way you think about what a PA can do. You graduate PA school, what do? You take care of patients. No, there's so much more. And none of this is set in stone for anyone. Like, there's not a clear path. There was not a clear path for me to work on clinical pathways. There was not an APP role in the quality department until I started asking questions. Understand that this is not going to be easy, but if you're really passionate about something, it will show and you will be rewarded for your efforts. I promise you, but you've got to put the work into it. So I want to arm you with the knowledge and change the way we think about just non-clinical roles for PAs in general. Okay, with that said, and I also think that this is my last bit. I also think that the non-clinical role builds our skill set, right? So like if you're burned out or you feel burned out and you're anticipating a job change in the next, say, year or two, working on these kinds of projects, working on little bits here and there, getting on committees, doing these kinds of things can elevate you for when you go to your next job and you have it on your resume that I was part of this committee. It shows leadership, it shows value, and it shows capability, and it shows that you can do more than just take care of patients. And so that skill set is super valuable. So anyway, I'll move on. I'm so excited to tell you guys these. All right, so let's get started. Like I said, non-clinical roles do not have to replace clinical roles. In some cases they do, but not always. So the first part of this is going to be broken up in 3 parts. The first part is going to be your why. The second part is going to be kind of like really not the what, but it's really what it is. And then the third part is the second part is what buckets you'll fall into. And then the third part is I'm going to just literally list every possible non-clinical role a PA can work in. So bear with me. The first part seems kind of tedious, but I'm going to ask this question, why do you want to be a non-clinical PA, for a very specific reason. And that is, you got to have some direction. You can't just say, I want to work in a non-clinical role. You got to understand why. So we're going to 3 sections. The why do you want to be a non-clinical PA? What types of non-clinical PAs, what categories or buckets there are. And then the last part is I'm literally just going to list. I think I have pages of lists. So let's get through this. All right, so why? Ask yourself, and this is part of the worksheet. If you're not, hi guys, I saw you're just joining. There's a worksheet. I'm going to either link it or I will make it available for a week on the Empowered PAs Facebook group. I'll give you the link for that. But in the worksheets, I will be talking about the same questions as well. So why? So ask yourself, why do you want to be a non-clinical PA? So for some people like myself, I was an ER PA. I was working lots and lots of hours and I was really struggling with home work-life balance or integration. I wasn't doing a good job. And I knew I needed something that was a little more flexible, that maybe I could work from home. Maybe I could do things in kind of a different time frame. So schedule is the number one reason for me of why I decided that I wanted to become a non-clinical PA in some format. I like the more regular hours from that standpoint. If you're ready to take the next step in your career, you're just kind of not burned out necessarily, but you're just kind of stagnant and you need to develop new skills, leadership skills or clinical skills or research skills. There's so many other kinds of skills that you can, advance as a PA. Maybe you know that you're ready for that. Especially for those PAs that are working over the 5-year mark. I find that up to about 5 years, you're just trying to catch up and keep up with medicine. And then after about 5 years, you kind of taper off, you get comfortable where you're working and you're ready to do something else. So that is another reason to become or work in a non-clinical role as a PA. Third, if you want to make change, this is going to be, I have to be very careful. I'm an ER person, so I tend to just kind of spit out what I'm thinking, and I think I need to be very careful with how I word this. But maybe if you're working in a clinical setting that might not be optimized for PAs, i.e. you want to make some change. And I'm super honest about this, guys. I'm honest to a fault. You'll read it on my face and you'll hear it in my voice. It is really hard when you're working in a place that does not support PAs. Or just APPs. I'm going to use that term APPs and PAs, in tandem. APPs is advanced practice providers, meaning PAs and NPs. But when you work in a culture where the APPs are not really welcomed. It's frustrating because you may work with amazing people, but the whole like institution or the environment is not very welcoming for PAs. It really helps to start working on non-clinical things. Depending on who your adversarial group is. If it's nursing, then work with them on a project. If it's, executive, work with them on a project. If you recognize pretty quickly that there's an adversarial relationship somewhere where you work, you may also recognize that working with them in a non-clinical type setting will actually benefit you and it'll benefit your other APPs. I think I said that relatively politically correct. Y'all can tell me if I didn't. But it's true. If you feel like you're hitting a wall and you know that you need to do more than just take care of patients to fix that, but you know that you can't just barrel in there like a bull in a china shop. You have to take it very slow. These little small wins by helping with projects or working on non-clinical type things can actually make change. And it also gets you at the table, right? Getting PAs at the table, putting a face to a PA so that people aren't talking about PAs and making changes for things, making changes for PAs in an institution. It's really hard when you're sitting there and they're talking about you. They react a little differently. So that may be one reason you want to become a non-clinical PA. You want to make changes at the state and national level, or national level. So I'm in Florida, so I'm a FAPA member. FAPA, go FAPA. Who's my FAPA people out there? You guys here? So FAPA, and then also AAPA. So maybe you're frustrated with the laws in your state, you can't prescribe certain medications, or there's some kind of archaic law that still exists, and you need to get into your capital and start lobbying against that, but you don't have the skills necessarily to have that conversation. I don't really have great public speaking skills, which is hilarious because I'm on a Facebook Live right now, but I'm fine on a camera, but when you get me in front of large groups that are looking back at me, I don't enjoy it. So I knew that was a skill I needed to add to my repertoire. And so that was one of the reasons I started tackling our clinical pathways, because I knew slowly it would force me to get in front of people and start talking about clinical pathways. And so that may be a reason why you decided that you want more skills. That might be why you want to work in a non-clinical setting as a PA. Or if you want to advocate for your patients better, maybe you see a process or a workflow that's deficient. I work in an ER, like I said. One of the biggest workflow issues we always have is related to triage. I'll give you an example. Our clinical pathways, we developed one, and I actually was the manager of the team. I didn't make the pathway, but when we developed it and when I started weighing in pretty heavily on it, it was a workflow issue. Our time to IV antibiotics for a febrile neonate, so a neonate under 28 days old that had a fever, they have to have antibiotics. They're supposed to have them, if you're going by evidence-based practice, within an hour. Well, that wasn't happening. We were going just over the hour mark, but we really wanted to clean that up a little bit. So what did we do? We changed the workflow. We improved the time from when they checked in to the time they got to a room, the time from check-in to the time that they got their lumbar punctures, the time to antibiotics. The nurses would apply the anesthetic on the neonate's back very quickly. We improved efficiency, and that helped patient care and honestly satisfaction to everybody, because the things that needed to be done were happening really fast. And so that's my example, but that's just like one example of so many other things. If you see a process, a workflow, a patient barrier, a disposition issue, I work in the ER, so I don't really deal with the upstairs piece of this, but if you work upstairs in a hospital setting, if you work in an ICU setting, anything, there are barriers everywhere we work, guys. Like, for sure, I promise you there's a workflow issue. That may be why you want to get involved in a non-clinical role as a PA, because you want to fix that. You want to make it better for patients, because the patient's the center of all of this, right? All of this work we're talking about, really, the patient is at the center. So that may be just one more reason. I'm almost done with this list, but I just want to go through them. Maybe you want to educate. So some people have these strengths. I like to mentor. I like to precept. I don't like to get in front of a classroom and be the sage on the stage and explain things right now in my career. But some people love that. And if you know that that's you, that's a non-clinical role. And there's a variety, and we'll talk about the different kinds of non-clinical educational roles PAs can take. But if you know that you want to educate the next generation of PAs, that puts you in this category. That puts you kind of in the non-clinical role as a PA. If you dislike your current job, that might be why you decided you wanted to be a non-clinical PA. But I'm going to warn you, and this is dangerous. It's a dangerous slope. If you just say, I want to do something else because I don't like my job, I really think you have to think about it. You have to have something more specific and dig into the reasons why. Because this non-clinical roles won't fix some of the other issues that we have. Like if you don't like certain personalities, working in a non-clinical role with that personality is not going to change that personality. Does that make sense? I hope it does. You just really dig in, because if it's the job, like you don't like taking care of patients, yes, a non-clinical role is for you. If it's the people you work with and personalities you're fighting, you got to think a little differently from that standpoint. Is it the culture that you work in? Is it the environment that you work in and you think that they're maybe open for change? Then that is a perfect reason to get involved in a non-clinical role, right? Like that, if you're working in a culture that needs a little nudge, you working in another setting besides just taking care of patients can really start shifting. It's slow, but it starts shifting their perception of your role. And that's real. I've seen it. It really does help. So that's actually a good reason. But just, if you dislike your job and you just want to do something different, just think about why. Just ask yourself why. If you want to be your own boss, right? So we PAs, we are in this weird world where we are never our own boss, but we have all of the responsibility and we are still not our own boss. And that can get really frustrating. And again, like I said, for those of you that are just joining, I'm an ER person. I don't have a really great filter. And so I'm going to try to be very careful on how I say this, but we've all been in that situation where maybe we didn't agree with one of the supervising or collaborating physicians we work with, and that can get a little bit frustrating. And so maybe you want to work in a non-clinical role to help that, and there's a whole bunch of different ways to address that. Or maybe you just want to be your own boss. Maybe you want to make your own schedule. That's a reason to become a non-clinical PA. And then if you, like I said, I kind of said this before, but if you have interest in owning a business and you know that you need other non-clinical skills. So I could run a clinic from a clinical standpoint, right? Like I know how to take care of the patients in a clinic. I'm not a good office manager, right? I don't have that skill set. And maybe I know that in the future I want to own a clinic, but I really need to figure out how to manage people, because maybe that's not a good skill set for me. I would immediately say to myself, well, whatever working environment I'm in now, I need to start learning how to manage people on someone else's dime under my current employer. So you may recognize that and say to yourself, this is why I'm seeking out non-clinical roles, because I need other skills. I need soft skills like communication. So some of us need that, myself included. If you're socially awkward and you need to fix that, that's one way to do it. Start working on non-clinical skills. Business skills, honestly, is kind of what the majority of them are. All right. So for those of you that are joining, please comment below and tell me why did you decide you wanted to even join this conversation, or why are you looking into a non-clinical role as a PA? What about this excites you? What about this is, your driver? And like I said, if you want to work through this on the worksheet, that's great too. But if you can comment below, I would love to see what everybody else is thinking. All right. So second, all right, buckets. I'm a bucket person. Categories, buckets, compartmentalization. That's just what I do. So I think that the best way to approach these non-clinical roles is that, you got to put them into buckets. And so the AAPA, the American Academy of PAs, or the CHLM, Center for Healthcare Leadership Management, who hosts an amazing, awesome executive leadership conference. By the way, it's in November. I think it's in Alexandria, Virginia. Really cool. Went to that last year. It was awesome. Anyway, they categorize non-clinical roles for PAs pretty well. I'm going to augment it just a little bit, but they have 5 categories. I'm going to add a 6th. So their categories are administrative, clinical, education, research, and industry. And then I add entrepreneur, which they all kind of overlap a little bit. But I feel like adding that entrepreneurial makes a difference because you're your own boss. And all those other categories, you could potentially be somebody's employee, but in entrepreneurial, you're your own boss. And for me, I like making that distinction. So an administrative PA manages the business of medicine, and there's a whole bunch of categories in the administrative role. Clinical PAs, clinical, like the clinical, non-clinical, it's hard. It's a little confusing, but clinical, that's kind of where I fall. I work on clinical pathways. So I want you guys to think about this kind of, I know it sounds like that's a clinical role, but it's not. There's an administrative aspect of managing clinical pathways, right? Even though we talk about taking care of patients, there's still a clinical or administrative piece to that. So really you're just ensuring optimal patient care. And that's, there's a lot of, in that bucket, there's a lot of opportunity, lots and lots of opportunity there. Education is training future professionals. Obviously that makes sense. Teaching in a variety of ways, and we'll talk about that. Research, so discovering, communicating new medical information. Clinical research is big. That's a great role for PAs. And industry. This is a kind of a cool one, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but industry this is where like farm reps and the MSLs kind of fall into that bucket. And so they basically are like consultants. So they provide expert consulting in kind of non-traditional settings. And so my sixth bucket, so we're talking about buckets, my sixth bucket is entrepreneurial. And I think that being an entrepreneur gives you a little different spin on things, and that's kind of why I want to add it to the list. So that's our 6 buckets of non-clinical roles as PAs. Got it? Awesome. All right. So this, it's really important that you focus in on these buckets, because I think it's, as a PA, there's a lot of things on that list that I want to do. I would love to do research. I think that research is really exciting. I like evidence-based practice. For me, that was really exciting. But I also really like taking care of patients. And I like taking care of patients and improving workflows. So for me, the clinical bucket, the one where I work on clinical pathways, that role for me is the top. That's the one I like the most. Research is kind of second. And then administrative, education and industry and entrepreneur are kind of a little bit lower. So when you're looking at roles as a PA, as a non-clinical PA, think about those buckets and think about which one applies to you the most. And it may be more than one, and that's okay, but I want you to kind of rank them, and I have that on that worksheet that I talked about. Hi, Chris. I saw you joined us. All right. When you're looking at these, and if you're not really sure, if you're like, okay, administrative, clinical, education, research, industry, and entrepreneurial, I don't know, I like them all. So start thinking about what things excite you. So, or what you dread. And that's the way to kind of work through this. So like, I really like writing. I'm kind of good at it. Sometimes I'm better than others, but I like writing. I enjoy it. I don't really like public speaking, which is hilarious. And because of that, I tend to do things that allow me to do more writing. And so that's kind of why I fall into the clinical bucket and maybe the research bucket, maybe less of the administrative or educational buckets. Different categories lend themselves to different skills. So like of the skills, I'm just going to list some skills. Think about which one of these excite you and which one of these you dread. Okay, so writing excites me. My husband, by the way, hates writing and loves public speaking. And so it just shows you that everybody's a little bit different. Writing, public speaking or presenting, collecting data, doing research, teaching, coaching or consulting. I don't know if Michele is here, but she's an awesome PA coach or pre-PA coach. Consulting. Some people love doing that. Some people don't. Advocating for patient care or patient safety, project management or leading teams. And so I love leading teams. And so that's kind of why I fall into that clinical bucket. But, those skills, think about those skills, which one of those skills really excites you, and then kind of apply it to which of these categories you really like. Okay. That's it. We're doing good on time. Oh man, we're not doing good on time. So I'm going to go through these topics relatively fast, and then we'll answer some questions for you guys. Okay. And so in those buckets, remember, there's no easy path for this. We're definitely going to go over time, guys. I'm sorry. So give me maybe 15 minutes and we'll get through all the rest of it. There's no easy path for PAs to become a non-clinical PA. It's just not there. It exists for nurse practitioners. It exists for physicians. There's lots of physician executives. It does not exist for us. So please keep this in mind. I am trying to arm you with the knowledge that these things exist as a PA. You can do these things, but there's going to be work involved. I want to change your thought process also to make sure that you understand that we are more than just providers. We can step away from the bedside and be extremely valuable to patients. You can do this kind of work. I've done this kind of work. It's awesome. It really has brought me a lot of joy and purpose as a PA. And so I really strongly recommend you even just work on little projects in these categories. Okay. So in the administrative bucket, so we're going to go through those buckets. So the administrative buckets, there's a couple, there's lots of them, but there's kind of four main categories. There's this kind of, everybody knows about this, right? There's a lead APP, and this is typically in a hospital setting. So in our ER department, we have like a lead APP. Then there's the APP manager, who is above the lead APP, and then there's our APP director. And so those three roles all have different purposes, right? If you're a lead APP, you know, you're basically kind of with your little cohort of PAs or APPs, you're kind of the microphone, the speaker piece, the one who brings things up to maybe the manager or addresses any concerns. The manager takes that a step farther and actually helps promote and provide leadership to the lead APPs and anybody else in that group that looks for, leadership roles, promoting leadership within those groups, reporting to the APP director, and advocating for PAs. So that's a great non-clinical role. If it exists in your department, that's awesome. I would definitely strive to join that. But if it doesn't, then I would definitely consider kind of starting the process of creating that role. Okay, and I don't need to go into that, so for time, I'll slow that down. Executive. So here's another role in the administrative bucket that is really awesome for PAs. So the executive, there's a bunch of executive roles, and I'm going to have a whole bunch of links on that worksheet. So Jamie Kemp is a director of an ambulatory clinic, and she is a PA, and it's an awesome role for if you're in an outpatient clinic setting, PAs can do that. PAs can work as non-clinical directors. There's no reason that they couldn't. And she does a great job. And so there's a link for, it's on empoweredpas.com. If you just look up Jamie Kemp, you'll find it. The other executive role is C-suite role. So if you have thought about working in the C-suite as a PA, as a physician assistant, and you're not really sure what you could do, I'm going to just list off really quick some of those things. Not all of these are very well spelled out for PAs. Like, I'll tell you right now that there's some of these are going to be like, there's no way a PA could fill that role. But that's just because that's the culture right now. That doesn't mean we aren't capable of doing it. So one thing is, you could be a medical staff executive dealing with peer review and credentialing. The care coordination VP deals with patient satisfaction. Med exec committee is a policies and procedures expert. There's no reason a PA couldn't do that role. And in fact, I think that we're probably very well suited for it. Quality and safety executives deal with performance improvement metrics and identifying practice variation, and also data collection and reporting systems for like process improvement, things like that. You could be on the hospital board. You can, and this is the tricky one, the chief medical officer is typically and historically a physician. I realize that is a stretch, but the roles, if you look at what they do, they're the liaison with medical staff, which I think a PA is well suited for as long as the culture is right. They communicate with quality officers, yes. They chair utilization management committees, which we'll talk about in a minute. Strategic planning, and those are the kinds of executive roles. Utilization management is a role for PAs. Helping billing with like billing and reimbursement type roles. It's actually a really good spot to be in, because if it's a Monday through Friday kind of job, but you're dealing with helping the hospital get reimbursed properly, you can also help providers with learning how to properly document so that they actually get reimbursed for what they're doing. And as a PA, we're super well suited for that role. So I think utilization management is one of those non-clinical roles that PAs should get into if you're interested in any of the reimbursement piece of it. And also that particular role as a utilization management PA, you can help coordinate the care coordination throughout the system. So like disposition, so like when a patient is admitted and then they are discharged, making sure that all that care coordination happens. And so we do that anyway, right? Like that's what we're doing in general, but this is a more formal role that's non-clinical that would kind of do the same. And then there's program manager. So I actually run our clinical pathways program, but if you're part of a heart program or a stroke program or whatever kind of program within a hospital, that role, the director or program manager, is very well suited for PAs. And that's another example of a non-clinical role that PAs can work through. Okay, so that is the administrative bucket. Second is the clinical bucket. So quality improvement, right? So we kind of talked about that. They support evidence-based practice. I'm a PA, that is very, very much in my wheelhouse. And so I love quality improvement projects. And this doesn't have to be a formal role. It can start with just some projects, but you can move into a formal role, which I have done as a PA if you're interested. So like I said, clinical pathways or clinical practice guidelines is the other term for that. If you like data, if you're a data nerd, like quality is the way to go. So it's under the clinical bucket for non-clinical roles, but quality improvement is data-driven analytics to evaluate practice variations and kind of just see how well we're taking care of patients. We made a clinical pathway for Kawasaki disease, and then we get data to see that made a difference and improved time to therapeutics. So that's just another great role. Who out here, I don't know if anybody is, but who out here enjoys, or maybe not enjoys, but tries to help with our EMR? So if you're an Epic champion or Cerner or whatever, that is a role that I've seen PAs take over. So the liaison between PAs working in the department and then the IT group, that there's always a need for a person who understands the clinical aspect of an EMR and can then translate it into IT. So EMR is a very, very big, important place, I think, for PAs to look into functioning in a non-clinical role. We're in the clinical bucket. The other clinical role you can take is developing a residency or fellowship for PAs. It kind of falls under, probably actually should be put under education, but there's a couple of great resources for that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the other non-clinical role you can take is to be a champion for some of the new technologies. There's some really great PAs out there. Brainy Leslie is on Instagram, and she deals with mixed reality surgeries. So it's kind of a hybrid, right? It is a clinical role, but she's a champion for those surgeries, and goes and does a lot of public speaking. And there's a piece to her role that is non-clinical. And I think that it's important to recognize that. There's also robotic and advanced surgeries. Telemedicine is another, even though the actual act of practicing telemedicine is clinical, the role of championing for telehealth or telemedicine within an institution is actually non-clinical. You'd have to, be a director of a program. Somebody has to run that, and PAs are really well suited for that. In fact, a PA named Desmond Watt, I interviewed him for empoweredpas.com. He did a great job talking about telemedicine and kind of his role with that. So that's a great non-clinical role, not just the actual taking care of patients, but actually organizing that piece of it. Okay, so that's that bucket. Oh, and then running a clinic, right? That's in the clinic bucket, but like we talked about before, as a business owner, there's a lot of non-clinical stuff that happens there. All right, the third bucket, is education. And that's kind of obvious, right? So like if you're looking to work in a non-clinical role as a PA and you could be a preceptor, right? You can provide workshops for patients or for providers. So if you like education and you want to do non-clinical work, go create a provider workshop where you teach them new providers how to suture or do lumbar punctures or cosmetic injections, For patients, you can do nutrition and dietary services and preventative care. You can do workshops for them. That's just non-clinical stuff that, you're not taking care of patients, but you are kind of in the same role. Formal teaching roles. So this is obvious, right? This is I want to work as a non-clinical PA, so I'm going to go work at a university and teach PA students. And that is a great non-clinical role. It can be local, or they have online PA programs, and I don't know how that works yet, but that would be an option potentially as well. PAEA is a good resource if you're looking to become a PA professional. PA education professional. There's also PAs that have gone out and started pilot programs for other PA programs internationally. So Jacqueline Rohan was interviewed a year ago on empoweredpas.com, and she piloted. She was one of the lead PAs who went to Ireland and spoke with their medical services and started their pilot PA program. There is some clinical pieces to that, but there's also a non-clinical administrative role that she had to function as to help develop that program. And then CME lecturing, right? That's not clinical. It's technically not clinical. You're still teaching. And so that kind of falls in that education bucket. I will tell you that if you like public speaking and you want to work in a non-clinical role, lecturing is something that definitely could be a non-clinical role as a PA. It could be your side hustle or side gig. That's fine. But there's a lot of opportunities in lecturing if you do it right. So there's honorariums that help cover costs. And your hospital may give you extra funding if you decide to lecture. And so that's part of that education non-clinical role that I thought I wanted to talk about. All right, so 3 more. The research bucket, there's not a lot, but clinical research is definitely a role that PAs should be involved in. There's a really great guy that I met at the FAPA conference. His name is Angel Ribo, R-I-B-O, and he owns Peninsula Research, which, is a research company in Florida. He primarily deals with HIV research, but he just does clinical research. And I hope he doesn't mind me shouting him out here on Facebook Live, but he does clinical research. That's all he does as a PA. How awesome is that? And it's a non-clinical role. He's also an entrepreneur. It's his business. So he's a great example of what PAs can do. Also, if you work in an academic center and you're interested in research as a non-clinical, it's not maybe not clinical research, maybe pharmaceutical research, maybe some other kind of research, find your IRB person, find your group, and they'll be able to help you there. All right, so the 4th, I think we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, industry. So this is probably one of the coolest up and coming places for PAs to work that's not clinical. Medical science liaison is a profession that I only recently was exposed to. So I'm going to kind of separate these. So there's when you think about big pharma, or you think about medical device, or even biotechnologies, they have these categories of professionals working for them. Most of the time, and the only group I knew about was the sales reps, because that's what you're exposed to. Which, by the way, is a great place for PAs to work. If you enjoy sales, or you're comfortable in that world, be a sales rep. That's the way to go. But also, if you don't like the sales piece of being a sales rep, but you like the knowledge piece of being a sales rep, or you like interacting with other professionals and giving them the science behind a certain drug or medical device, this is the role for you. It's called a medical science liaison, MSL. There's several PAs that do this already. One, her name is Michele Sororo. I'm probably mispronouncing her name. She's awesome. I just spoke to her the other day, and she is on Instagram. She's in a couple of the PA groups that I'm in as well, but she loves her job. She said that it's been very rewarding for her. So actually, we're hopefully going to put an article together about her role as an MSL. But basically, so these PAs are hired by the pharmaceutical group or a med device group, and they concentrate on a specific area, and they're basically acting as the scientific resource and advise providers about their products and the scientific data, but they are not sales. So they don't have a bottom line that they have to meet. And so that's the beauty of that role, is that there's not this quota you have to meet from the standpoint of selling the product. And that's a big deal for me as a provider. Like, I don't want to sell a product, but I do want to talk about the science of a drug and why this drug is a better drug than another drug. So they actually are basically that scientific resource. And so they go to conferences and they go into whatever specific setting their product, is in, used in, so like intensive care units, if it's a vasopressor, etc. So there's already PAs that are doing that work, and if you're looking for a non-clinical role, MSLs are definitely a really cool one. There's another person named Abby Johnson. She's a PA that did that, and the PAs do that.net. She had an article, and that was a really good article, and that resource will be on the worksheet too. All right, so the last one is entrepreneurial. So I kind of categorized in the entrepreneurial bucket of non-clinical roles. There's two basic categories, right? There's medical writing, which I think is a great role for PAs, and we'll talk about that in a meeting. And then there's the other category. So medical writing, I'm going to go through this relatively quick. Jordan Roberts is a PA. He's I believe he's a neurosurgery PA, but he also owns Modern Med Ed. And I interviewed him on empoweredpas.com, so that's definitely a place to learn more about it. But he promotes medical writing for medical professionals as a way to basically kind of get into non-clinical roles on your own time. So if you like writing, if your answer to that question of what do I like to do is I like writing, medical writing is definitely one of the ways to go. So Modern Med is a really good resource. Doc Jobs is actually a cool resource of jobs that are non-traditional jobs for medical providers. It's kind of tailored to physicians, but I think a lot of those apply to PAs too. JAPA, you could write for JAPA. That's a non-clinical role, is writing. If you want to practice medical writing, Figure One's a really good app to practice and deliver content to, and then you could be a blogger, a PA blogger. So and ampersand PA Non is a great example of that, and I interviewed her, and her interview is on Empowered PAs she's an ENT PA also. All right, so this other category here is this list of a bunch of different things that PAs have done, and these are actual PAs. This is not like I think PAs could do this. John with CME for Life, I also interviewed him. He's on empoweredpas.com. He owns many businesses. One of them is CME for Life. So he goes around and gives CME lectures, and that's all he does. He doesn't take care of patients clinically because he is so full and so busy doing that. He also has a couple other businesses, but that's one of his main ones. Medalita, Laura Francisco, is a PA who started a scrub company, and she's done an awesome job. I love her. I'd love to interview her sometime. We're playing the email game, but hopefully she'll be on Empowered PAs at some point too. Med Enthusiast is a fantastic medical clothing line run by Andrea, who's a PICU PA, and just had a very sweet baby girl. Health Gig Jobs, GIG, Health Gig Jobs, is a app that has not yet launched, but will very soon, and you all will hear very, 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 very much more about it. But it's run by a PA. He started that app. He's been developing it for like 2 years, but that app it's like Uber for PAs. It's great. Not Uber because of transportation, but like medical care Uber. It's going to be really cool. My PA Box is also owned by 2 PAs. That is an app. Well, it's an application. But it's a website that helps pre-PAs organize all of their documents and search for schools. Anyway, it's a PA business. They started it because they recognized that pre-PAs have a lot to do before they become PAs. And so they put a lot of effort into that, and it's their business, and that's what they did. It's a non-clinical role, and they've done really good work. Oh, there's a discount if you use the Empowered PAs code if you're ever interested. But it's really for pre-PAs right now. They're a PA named Afton Heinzenbrader. I interviewed her on Empowered PAs. She developed a product called The Pill, PILL, which is Prescription Interval Limit Lock. And that device helps with the opioid crisis. It helps prevent people from over or underdosing themselves. It's a really cool product, but it's non-clinical, and it was something I wanted to bring up. Dave Mittman started or was one of the founders of Clinician One, which is I believe it's an app that helps medical providers speak about cases and present cases. And so that's non-clinical and definitely something to think about. Some PAs out there, Chris, if you're still here, run house calls. So they own companies that do house calls for patients. And so the house call piece of it is obviously clinical, but to own that company is not clinical at all. And there's a lot of business skills that you need as a non-clinical PA. And so Chris, I interviewed her, and that's on empoweredpas.com. And there's also actually one of the PAs I used to work with named Megan Verdoni owns ER Liaison, and she has done really great work. And it's not completely house calls. There's more to it for her business, and I don't know all of her business model, but it's the same concept in that PA goes to the patients, and that the clinical piece of it is there, but there's also a non-clinical role there. Leanne Hahn, I feel like she's everywhere. She has a lot of businesses. One of them is Advanced Practice Provider Solutions, which is a business for PAs and APPs to basically to help them with anything that they need, resume writing, with the legal aspect. She's a PA that works as a contractor, so she's privately contracts herself, and that's how she works clinically. And so she's a really good resource for PAs looking to do that kind of work or needs resume reviews, things like that. And there's so much more to her business, and I'm sorry, I'm probably not completely speaking of it correctly, but she also has several other businesses. So she's a go-getter, that is for sure. One of my former colleagues owns momgenuity.com. Momgenuity is basically a product that'll be coming out for nursing mothers. And I'm excited when her product finally does come out, but that's a non-clinical role for PAs. So I think it's important to talk about, like, these are things that PAs are doing that is not taking care of patients. And that's why I'm literally just listing them off for you. From a coaching standpoint, we talked about this. So Michele Sororo is the posh PA. She does an awesome job coaching pre-PAs. And so if you like coaching, there are a lot of opportunities, not just for pre-PAs, but like nutritional counseling, even pharmaceutical counseling and coaching. The PA platform is run by Savannah Perry. She's also a pre-PA coach. So Michele and Savannah do a great job with that niche. So I probably wouldn't touch that niche too much because they're powerhouses in that field. But from a, coaching standpoint, PAs are very well suited for that role. Joel Olmsted, I interviewed him on Empowered PAs. He did a great job. He owns Biome Veda, which is a nutritional coaching service. So just think about other things you can do as a PA. Podcasters, Chris Madej and Adrienne Banning are awesome examples. I interviewed Chris Madej on Empowered PAs, and then Adrienne Banning is on the JAPA podcast. Airways and Educators is another PA podcast, and then PAs can work as legal experts as well. So there's actually an Academy of PAs in Legal Medicine. That resource will be on the worksheet that I provide to you guys. And so that's my entire list. I'm a little over, but that's my entire list. That's everything. Like that is so many things that you could potentially do as a PA. I would love to see what you guys are interested in, or at least reach out to me and tell me. I would love to comment below. Just tell me what you guys are interested in. There's so many opportunities out there. You can't say that I can't work, I only am allowed to take care of patients because I'm a PA. That's not true. There's so much out there. So if you're still hanging around, the worksheet, let me just go over it really quick. This is the worksheet. It's a digital worksheet, but it's only a PDF, so it's not fillable right now. I'm sorry, I don't have that technology yet. But it's just basically going over your why, which is what we talked about, and then what skills you think you have, and then right there is your list of all the things we talked about so that you don't have to write it all down. So that little list is nice, and then just kind of putting it all together. And then on the back, there is all the links and resources I talked about. So it's free. It is available to anybody who's stuck around this long. All right, the website. This is a long website. You ready? I'll link it in the comments afterwards, okay? It's www.subscribepage.com/nonclinical PA roles. And I'll link that below. I wish there might be a way I can do it here when I'm all done. But that is the website. So it's www.subscribepage.com/nonclinical PA roles. And that is a worksheet. You have to sign up for it. You will end up getting our monthly newsletters. If you don't want it, you can just unsubscribe. But it'll give you that worksheet, and that'll kind of give you some more information. So, all right.